Hey everyone, Boardgame Brody here with Meeple Mountain. I am super excited about Meeples and Monsters. It's a new game coming out on Kickstarter by AEG. Meeples and Monsters is a bag builder worker placement game of fighting monsters, overlords, and henchmen in the realm of Rowan. The lands are being invaded by the evil forces of Mordraw in the realm of people. The king has asked for help to save the realm, and whoever mutters up the most potent force will be declared the new Earl Marshal. I'm here to tell you 4 things that you need to know about this game. Number 1. The mechanics. Bag building. This game uses a bag building mechanic where you will be pulling out a certain number of meeples to be used each round, placing them in your tavern. Depending on the worker placement spots available on the board you choose to assign those meeples, you might gain upgraded units that have the ability that others don't. Or you might end up adding more peasants to your pool, which dilutes your bag, and it will be harder to pull out your true heroes as those peasants get in the way. The worker placement. This works by placing your available meeples from your tavern onto the buildings on the board. You will need to fulfill the requirement listed on the left side to then gain the benefit shown on the right. Worker placement spots will grow throughout the game as players decide to build additional buildings. Using units to build will give that player rewards like better units or more quests that they can achieve throughout the game. By the end of the game, players will mostly be visiting all the locations placed out on the board to either get better units, change their units somehow, or most likely fighting monsters to gain points. With a nice blend of those 2 mechanics, the bag building and the worker placement, you will improve and thin out your bag with the best meeples to then fight monsters, fulfill quests, and conquer objectives at the castle's towers. Combat. The combat is simple in this game. If you have a higher combat value from your combined units assigned to fight that monster versus that monster's strength value, then you will defeat them and you will take that monster card to add to your player area and collect any victory points associated with that monster that you defeated, and in some cases, an added ability. You will want to be preparing to fight the Dark Council, which is out at the beginning of the game so that you can plan how to defeat them. But you won't be able to fight them until you and all other players have killed enough monsters in the monster deck so that the 3 Dark Council Arrive cards are revealed from that deck. After 3 Dark Council Arrive cards are revealed, then the game will proceed with 2 last rounds before the end of the game, allowing you to fight these overlords. The player with the most points from defeating monsters, successfully achieving quests, and fulfilling objectives at the castle's towers wins the game, and the realm of Rowan will have a new Earl Marshal. Number 2. The gameplay. Players will be taking turns in a clockwise direction where players will go through a development phase, the main phase, and then a draw phase. During the development phase, players can add new locations onto the board to add some additional worker placement spots so that they can do more stuff later. But in doing this, you won't be able to have as many units to use during the main phase, so this phase is optional. Players can assign any number of active units to either be upgraded or 1 or 2 peasants to build a new location. When building and placing 2 peasants, you won't accrue new peasants, but when taking the spot that only requires 1, he will bring a friend along that will be added to your pool later, weakening the overall strength of future turns. When building, you will add one of the available 4 locations that are face up onto the board in a vacant spot. That player will then receive the bonus depicted on the slot that the tile is placed on. Now another option besides building in this phase is you can upgrade your units. Only the listed units on the board can be upgraded. So you will place that type of meeple on the spot during this phase, and then you will collect the next level card of that unit to add to your player area. Sometimes this will cost victory points to do, in which you have to actually have some to perform this action, and you will go back that number of points shown on the chart depending on the type and the level that you're upgrading to. But from now on, that type of unit will have the combat value and abilities shown on the card that matches those units. After you're done with this phase, either building with your peasants or upgrading units, all of those meeples will then go to your lodging, including any additional meeples that you generated by their assignment. This area is kind of like your discard area. Now the main phase occurs. Players will be able to activate any locations on one of the 4 quarters of the city, excluding the spots used in the previous phase. Players can visit any building tile, they can perform combat, or visit a tower room. Buildings that were just constructed can also be activated and used at this time. Each location shows the units required to activate that location. This is shown on the left side of the arrow of that location. And remember, each location can only be activated once per turn. Now, if that quarter of the board has 2 or more monsters present, then those locations are overrun with monsters, and if you assign units to any locations within that quarter of the board, then you will gain more pesky peasants who are trying to help you, but really, without realizing it, they aren't. In the case of 2 monsters, you will add an extra peasant from the supply to the location activated. With 3 monsters, 2 peasants will be added. These peasants will be added to your collection of meeples and most likely clog up your bag. If you have an area that is overran but you assign units to defeat a monster in that same area, then you won't need to add any peasants when taking any of the actions within that area of the board. So plan accordingly. There are 2 big groups of units in the game. Basic units made up of mages who are weak in combat but good at researching and doing well in quests. Clerics who are good with helping with corruption. Knights who are advanced in fighting with high combat. Warriors who have standard fighting skills with good combat abilities. And peasants who are the weakest units but good for constructing buildings. The more advanced units, the prestige class, are special and limited. Rangers have elite combat powers for fighting monsters with a base combat value of 3 and gain an additional victory point for each time it defeats a monster. Paladins have a combat value of 2 but gain an additional combat value for each level of monster it is assigned to fight. The greater the darkness, the brighter the paladin shines. The Shaman has a combat value of 2 and can be used as any basic unit for the purposes of activating locations. The basic units have abilities printed on their card, and you can activate that ability once per turn regardless of how many of the same units that you draw. If it's a prestige unit, their abilities are printed on their cards and they affect each individual unit of that type. These units also have levels, but once you gain one of a certain level, they cannot be upgraded any further. But no matter their level, they can be useful for quests and Dark Council monster bonuses at the end of the game. After placing and resolving your units, you will then clean up by adding all played out and gained units to your lodging, and then the draw phase occurs. Monster cards all slide down to the lowest numbered slot, and additional monster cards are drawn equal to the number of monsters defeated on this turn. There will always be 6 monsters out at a time. When a monster card is drawn, it is placed in the location matching the symbol of that monster. If a Dark Council card is drawn, then you will immediately add a Corruption Meeple into each player's bag, and all players other than the active one immediately draws an additional Meeple. The active player will then draw 4 new meeples from their bag to be placed in their tavern, or 5 if the Dark Council Arrives card has just been drawn. And after that first card, it's going to be 5 from there on out. 6 if 2 Dark Council Arrive cards have been drawn. So players will slowly pull out more and more meeples on their turn as the game progresses. Now at any time, if you don't have enough meeples in your bag to draw out, you will place all the meeples from your lodging into the bag and continue drawing until you have the correct total number of meeples. If any of your units have an ability during the draw phase, then it can be activated at this time. You will check to see if you have completed any quests as well from the combination of meeples that are placed in your tavern. Lastly, if less than 4 building tiles are by the side of the board, then you will draw a new one so that there are always 4 to choose from. Quest cards will be kept secret from other players, and these cards will give you extra points and possible bonuses. Each player starts with 2, but you can gain more throughout the game, and there is no limit to how many that you can have. If you accomplish the quest, then you will gain the points listed in the purple section, but if you don't fulfill the quest by the end of the game, then you will lose the points shown in the red section. After 3 Dark Council cards have been drawn, players can then place their units to fight the overlords. This is similar to how you fight the monsters, except the overlords are never truly defeated, and the cards stay out for all players to fight. Once you defeat one of the overlords, you cannot defeat them again, so a player marker is placed after victory. The henchmen, however, can be defeated over and over and over again. Now you should know that defeating the Dark Council, it won't help count for or against any quest that you might have, so players can also still take actions to fulfill those while also fighting the overlords. When players finish their final 2 rounds, they will check any end-of-game quest or end-of-game tower rooms. The player with the most points from defeating monsters, resolving quests, and completing tower rooms wins the game. Number 3. Some comparisons. Comparing this game to others will help you figure out if this is a game for you or not. So I feel like the game is kind of a combination of Orleans, Champions of Midgard, and Lords of Waterdeep. Although I say this game is similar, it does its own stuff. I love that it includes tons of meeples, and they all work differently. Locations are drawn out randomly, and each can change the mini actions that you can perform in the game. The quests are unlimited and have a positive or negative effect depending on if you achieve it or not by the end of the game. You can upgrade your units, unlike some of these other games that I mentioned, which is pretty awesome to be able to do. And in addition, there's a lot of a variety to choose from, as there are 8 different types of units. The game is also set up so if you can't do something exactly perfect, but you still want to do something, there is a penalty that just gives you more and more peasants, but still lets you take some of these actions. But there is a consequence, as later on you will need to spend more time getting rid of these peasants if you can. As far as the weight of the game, I feel like it's right in the same ballpark as the other games I compared it to. A little bit more complex than Lords of Waterdeep and Champions of Midgard, and about similar to the complexity of Orleans. But again, totally different from these games. Number 4. My thoughts on the game. The weight of this game is great. It's a medium to heavy using a worker placement mechanic where the game includes plenty of spots for your workers to visit. The game also slowly progresses, adding more and more locations out, usually adding ones that will help you out during that phase of the game. Strategy is very much required to do well in this game, but you will need to pivot your strategy by building and visiting certain locations, but also playing in a way that you maximize abilities of the meeples that you have. For example, if you have a lot of peasants and knights, you might want the ability that boosts the peasant's strength when attacking with a knight. So then you want to set your bag up with knights so the peasant can be placed with them every round to kill off more and more monsters. There are so many different abilities and the ways that you can get your units stronger or combine them with others using certain abilities to do this. And knowing this, this makes the game so there is no one way to play the game. You could focus on gaining lots of mages and upgrade them to use their special abilities, or you could gain lots of warriors or clerics to add more flexibility in what they do each round. To restate and reinforce what I'm trying to say, with all the variety in the game, the buildings, the quests, and the towers that come out randomly each time that you play, you'll need to plan a strategy of how the game is going for you thus far, but you also need to continually visit that strategy to know if it's the best or if you need to slightly change it to what the game is presenting to you right at that moment. Again, there is no one way to play the game and win every single time. Lastly, I want to mention some of the smaller details that make this game great. The corruption meeples are a good addition to this game, as you need to manage them within your pool of meeples, but they can also help when you get certain abilities, or they can be destroyed by some of the tower objectives. Just remember, you can't place them, those corruption meeples, on any of the locations really, so they are bad, but you can strategically use them for a benefit. The addition of always having 6 monsters on the board will cause certain quadrants of the board to be overran, which will add to the management of peasants that you have in your pool. As monsters get defeated, new ones will be added to new locations, switching which quadrants of the board are overran and better to go to. So this also adds to some of the more strategic decisions in the game. And the monsters do progress and get bigger and badder monsters that give more and more points. And as the monsters get harder, the game also lets you increase your numbers of meeples that are drawn from your bag, giving you even more options. And at the same time, more buildings will be on the board, giving you more options to place those meeples on as well. The game is essentially a race to kill these monsters and gain points, but figuring out what might be the best way to do that is where a strategic plan needs to be placed. But remember, those overlords will give you a lot of points, so planning from the beginning to be able to defeat them needs to be included in your plan. AEG is becoming a force to be reckoned with, so grab your meeples to kill some monsters with your family and friends in Meeples and Monsters by AEG. Again, this is Boardgame Brody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around and check out some other board game reviews to see what you might want to get to the table.